I didn't know what to expect for a unit called Evidence Deep Dive, but this is amazing! I don't even know how far we are beneath the Earth's surface. It's so quiet here, peaceful, and yet I can feel an energy here. People from the past marking evidence of their existence on these walls. Look here! Amazing to picture that years ago someone created these paintings and etched something alongside them. Facts, quotes, summaries, paraphrases. I wonder what all this once meant to somebody. I wonder what it might mean to me. Welcome to Lesson 2 of Unit 4, our deep dive into using evidence in your writing. Today, we will define 4 types of evidence: facts, quotes, summaries, and paraphrases, and discuss when and how to use each type. Let's get into it. Follow along on your PDF and record guided notes as we go. The first type of evidence we'll discuss is just the facts. A fact is something known to be true. A fact can be scientific, like the biological fact that mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell, or the cultural fact that Americans drink 3 times as much coffee as they do tea, or even the literary fact that Moby Dick is a novel about a ship captain's monomaniacal obsession with killing a white whale.
There she blows!
The second type of evidence is a quote. A quote is what it sounds like, something that you are taking exactly, word for word, from another source. Maybe you are quoting a biology teacher who has stated in class that mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. Or you're quoting an economist who has written that Americans drink 3 times more coffee than they do tea. Or maybe you're taking a quote from a novel, like when Moby Dick's Captain Ahab said, "Talk not to me of madness, man. I'd strike the sun if it insulted me." The third type of evidence is a summary. A summary is a brief retelling of a topic's main points. For example, you might summarize the study in which that economist found Americans drink so much more coffee than tea by giving your reader a sense of who, where, when, and how the data was collected to make that determination. In an essay about the novel Moby Dick, you may include a summary of some of the rising action as your evidence. Eventually, Captain Ahab sends 3 different boats out to try to kill the giant whale, but each of them are destroyed by Moby Dick's mighty struggle to survive. This summary is evidence, even though it's retelling what happened in a fictional story, because it's indisputable that those things happened in the book. The final type of evidence we'll talk about today is paraphrasing. When you paraphrase, you restate a quote from a text or a person in your own words. How is paraphrasing different from summarizing, you ask? Well, what do you think? Pause this video, review the notes you've taken so far today, and then record your ideas in the space provided. We'll come back in just a sec to talk it out. What did you say? I'll share what I have with you, and then we can compare notes. I wrote, when you paraphrase, you put someone else's speech or text into your own words. When you summarize, you give your reader a sense of the main points of a broader text or idea. How does your answer compare to mine? Let's look at a side-by-side comparison to get a better sense of the differences between summarizing and paraphrasing. If you're providing someone with a summary of what you learned in biology class, you will give them some key takeaways from the whole lesson or unit. Maybe you explain that the lesson is about the parts of the cell, including mitochondria, cell membrane, and cytoplasm, and that these parts interact with each other to form the base of organic life. See, those are a couple main takeaways from a lesson that probably took you at least a few days to go through. On the other hand, you'd paraphrase your science teacher's quote about the mitochondria being the powerhouse of the cell by writing something like, "The cell relies on mitochondria for energy." When you paraphrase, you're putting a specific quote into your own words. So now we've gotten an overview of the 4 types of evidence we'll focus on in this unit: facts, quotes, summaries, and paraphrases. But the big question is, how do you know when to use each one? Are there some types that are better to use than others? Well, it depends on what you're trying to do with your writing. Here we have a fact, a quote, a summary, and a paraphrase all on the same topic: superbike racing. You have this text on your PDF as well as on your screen. Fact: brothers Ross and Ralph Hannon built the world's first superbike in the 1970s. Quote: Formula One racer and owner of Motorsport Vision, Jonathan Palmer, has said, "As soon as I saw my first race, I was completely hooked. The racing is incredibly close and full of drama. The top riders really are heroes." Summary: superbike racing is a type of motorcycle racing that uses modified versions of production motorcycles. Paraphrase: former Formula One racer Jonathan Palmer has spoken about the incredible draw of the action-packed, thrilling sport. Consider each kind of evidence you see on the screen and on your PDF. Pause this video and record your initial thoughts. What do you notice about the similarities and differences between the fact, quote, summary, and paraphrase you see? What questions do you have so far? And if you're ready for a stretch, what kinds of writing do you think each type of evidence would fit best? Don't worry if you don't know yet. We'll go over this together when you get back. You may have noticed that a fact gives you a small piece of information about a topic, while a summary gives a broader sense of a topic as a whole. You may have also seen that a quote can provide an immediate and intimate view of a topic from the perspective of someone who really knows it well. A quote can also provide the opportunity to do what we call a close reading of a text. That is, looking carefully at the word choice, imagery, and syntax the speaker or author is using. For example, in the quote from Jonathan Palmer, his use of the word heroes to describe superbike racers really gives the audience a sense of the reverence and respect he holds for the sport. As a writer, how do you make choices about whether to use a fact, quote, summary, or paraphrase in your writing? Go ahead and try the matching activity on your PDF to use what you already know to make some educated guesses. We'll talk about your answers in just a sec. Okay, here's what I got. You would use a fact to introduce the name of the person who was the first woman to win the Nobel Prize, since in that situation, you're providing your reader with just a small piece of information. It was Marie Curie, by the way, for her work on radioactivity. You would use a quote if you wanted to closely analyze how specific imagery in a novel shapes its theme, because you want to be able to explain how you are making meaning of the author's words or phrases. You would use a summary to provide a brief overview of a historical time period you will be discussing, maybe as part of an introduction paragraph you are writing. This is because you want to give your reader a sense of the time period in general before you go into something more specific. Like, say your essay is on the use of the Japanese Zero during World War II. Before you get way into the specifics of mid-century military aircraft technology, you'd have to make sure your readers know what World War II was about, who fought in it, etc. Finally, you'd want to use a paraphrase if you are wanting to let your reader know the gist of a Shakespearean soliloquy, without fully quoting the whole 35 lines. Before we close out, there's one last thing I wanted to share with you about what I said earlier about how evidence needs to be irrefutable. I know I told you that all your evidence needs to be irrefutable, but what if you're using a quote from a scientist you saw online who is saying that the moon is made out of cheese? Could you use this evidence? That would depend on what assessment you've made about this quote and how you are interpreting it for your claim. Basically, how you are planning to use the quote in your writing. If you are using the fact that the scientist said this as evidence that he is not a very reliable source, that works because the fact that he said this is irrefutable. However, if you are using the content of his speech as evidence to support a claim based on the moon being made out of cheese, that doesn't work because it's not true. Just wanted to make sure we're clear on that. We'll keep working on the what and the why of evidence throughout this lesson, so no need to panic if you don't quite get it yet. On day 2 of this lesson, you'll review what we went over today and get in a mini lesson on how to summarize and paraphrase. Then on day 3, you'll practice using facts, summaries, quotes, and paraphrases in your own writing. Remember, we are right here with you. Right on.